Two huge developments to talk about today. First one will hit, I did no reporting on, but we're still going to talk about it today. The second one was a story that I wrote. The first one is a story about a meeting in Trump Tower in June 9th that we know about now between a lawyer who represents a number of clients in the Russian government and three key figures in the Trump campaign. Paul Manafort, who was at the time the campaign manager, Jared Kushner, who is both his senior advisor and his son-in-law, and Donald Trump Jr., who, by the name, I'm going to go ahead and make you guess what his relationship is to Donald J. Trump. Now, what we know about this, thanks to Donald Trump Jr., is that he went to the meeting lured there by the promise from the Russian national that they had dirt on Hillary Clinton. In other words, a Russian national reached out to Donald Trump Jr., said, I have dirt on Hillary Clinton, would you like to meet? And Donald Trump Jr. said, yes, I would love to meet. Now, there are many reasons that this is problematic, and this is going to become a huge problem for Trump Jr. and probably for Trump Sr. Anybody who knows anything about how the Russians are going to come across that information knows that the most likely way that they got it is not through gossip at a dinner party or something. They got it through espionage. And you can start to piece together what may have happened here. There's a hacking of the DNC. There's a hacking of John Podesta's emails. Russians wind up with this information. They reach out to the Trump campaign, say they have dirt on Hillary Clinton. Trump campaign agrees to a meeting. We know those certain types of things are now quite plausible, and we're starting to have the dots to be able to connect them. Now, it is still quite possible, and I'm curious what some of you all think. It is still quite possible that too much focus on this issue is a distraction from the larger problems that led to the election of Donald Trump in the first place. On the other hand, there is a second reality going on at the same time where it appears like underneath a lot of this smoke, we're starting to see at least some flickers, some small flames coming up, because now you have these three key members of Donald Trump's inner circle saying that they met with the Russians because the Russians promised them dirt on the Hillary Clinton campaign. That means that there was at least a willingness to collude with the Russians in order to beat Hillary Clinton in the campaign. It's a startling admission from Donald Trump Jr. The guy clearly does seem to be as dumb as he looks. I mean, if you compare his statement on Saturday, which pretended that the entire thing was just about Russian adoption policy, compared to Sunday when he was confronted with the news that no, in fact, we know why you met. His story completely changed, and in defending himself, he accidentally implicated himself in an extraordinary scandal. So happy to take. I want to hear what you guys think about this. I want to hear whether you think this is more kind of Russia nonsense, or if you're starting to think that this might actually be a thread that ought to be pulled at further. The second story is one that I wrote with Clayton Swisher and Ben Walsh at the Intercept, and it gets to what geopolitics are like when you have two families who run real estate empires, also global real estate empires, also overseeing foreign policy. And I'm referring not just to Donald Trump, but to Jared Kushner. I'm not sure how closely you've been following the situation in the Gulf right now, but the tiny nation of Qatar is currently being blockaded by Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt. This is the fight that broke out after Donald Trump went to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He came home and claimed credit for sparking this crisis. On Twitter, he said, I told the leaders there that they needed to crack down on terrorism. Everybody pointed at Qatar, and I said, crack down on Qatar, and look what's happening, and maybe we're going to finally end the scourge of terrorism. That was a Donald Trump quote from Twitter. So quickly, somebody informed Donald Trump that, well, perhaps you have some beef with Qatar, but you may not know that there is a U.S. Base stationed there with about 10,000 U.S. troops. So calling them, allies of Al-Otaiba or ISIS might not be the most productive way forward. And so Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, starts to walk back some of the Trump administration's attack on Qatar and calls for an immediate end to the blockade. Within just a couple of hours, Trump, this time egged on, reportedly by Jared Kushner, completely contradicts his Secretary of State and says, no, Qatar is a giant historic funder of terrorism, and this problem needs to be dealt with. So as we speak, the nation is still facing a blockade. They're now working with Turkey, with Oman, with Iran to try to get supplies in. And what this is doing is it is reshaping the politics of the Middle East, and it's changing the course of history, because no longer are you going to have this kind of block of Gulf countries that is united, and instead you're going to have Qatar kind of moving closer to Iran and to Oman and to Turkey, which may or may not be a good thing long term, but what it is a very significant thing. Now, what I reported today is that what had not been known before is that Jared Kushner had spent the last year and a half plus trying to extract a more than $500 million loan from Qatar for his failing flagship investment at 666 Fifth Avenue, New York. So for those of you who live in Manhattan, you probably know this building, might even be aware of this story. But in 2007, Jared Kushner, at the time in his 20s, was kind of this trying to make a name for himself as this brash New York real estate giant, and he came in with this splashy purchase. It's paying basically double the record, the previous record for Manhattan real estate. Something like $1,200 a square foot he paid for this old building. This was 2007, of course. At the time, there were a lot of people saw that the real estate market was cresting and was on its way down. They were correct. Kushner was wrong. The crest broke into a wave and did crash, as we know. The Kushner companies put in $500 million. A recent New York Times kind of analysis of how this investment has gone included the conclusion that $500 million that they put in has been effectively wiped out, lost the entire amount. So he needs to find an extraordinary amount of capital to refinance this thing. Luckily for him, he's now one of the most powerful people in the world. So when he comes knocking, people listen.
So in relation to this report for the Intercept, so Eric wanted me for you to expand on that a little bit. So the paragraph reads, the revelation of the $500 million deal raises thorny and unprecedented ethical questions. If the deal is not entirely dead, that means Jared Kushner is on the one hand pushing to use the power of American diplomacy to pummel a small nation, while on the other his firm is hoping to extract an extraordinary amount of capital from theirs for a falling investment. If, however, the deal is entirely dead, the pummeling may be seen as an intimidating to other investors on the end of a Kushner company's pitch. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, exactly. So people are saying there's some dispute over whether or not this deal is completely dead. And when it comes to real estate, nothing's ever completely dead. So let's pretend for a second that it is still alive. That means Jared Kushner is pushing a foreign policy that is absolutely pummeling Qatar right now. They are getting blockaded. They're getting isolated. The rest of the Gulf countries are downgrading their ties with them. Donald Trump himself called them funders of terrorism, both at a press conference and then later at a fundraiser. And if they are still in active negotiations or still hoping to extract $500 million from them, that raises all sorts of questions about what the actual goal of the foreign policy is here. And it also raises an issue around hypocrisy here. If it is really true, as the Trump administration is saying, that Qatar is financing terrorism around the Middle East, then should they be out asking for a $500 million loan for a real estate investment here in New York? Is that appropriate? Does it raise national security concerns? Separately, if the deal is actually dead, and if the Qataris rebuff this effort to raise $500 million from them, and about 8 weeks later they find themselves blockaded and the U.S. cheering on the blockade, what does that say to other people who then get pitches from Kushner companies around the world or from the Trump organization around the world, say, hey, we've got a great deal here that you should invest in. The investor is going to know what happened to the last major investor who said thanks, but no thanks for that offer. So this is not the kind of thing that we've ever seen before from a White House, to have a conflict of this depth and of this breadth. And what it also means is that whenever they go, even if this was unintentional, even if these people are as pure as Caesar's wife, the conflict is still there, and so it still raises questions no matter how honest they're being. So you could start to look at other places that the president has been tough on. Were there deals that went sour in Germany, for instance? Were there deals that have gone sour in China, or wherever else he winds up picking a fight? You only have to lift up and start to look what kind of business conflicts are going on here.
Ryan, can you try to tie the two big headlines together? Is there a way to do that?
Well, I mean, they're both corruption, and Jared Kushner is involved in both, which is an interesting little data point, because this is a guy who has given. I checked his Twitter account today; he has 0 tweets, which is classic Jared Kushner. He has spoken publicly exactly once in the last year. He's, as far as I know, he's still 30 years old. This is an entirely obscure person, completely unelected, married into this Trump family. His father is a convicted felon, put in jail by Chris Christie. He's since been released from prison, and he was one of the people who was the point person for negotiating this deal with Qatar. And this person that nobody knows really anything about, and is becoming one of the most powerful people, not in the administration, and therefore in the world. And it's a completely bizarre situation. It's hard to know what to make of it.
Okay, zoom out a little bit. Okay, so if I had to sum up the question so far, it boils down to: is there any way to blame Hillary Clinton about this?
Well, I mean, yeah, for losing. Like, she should have been a better politician. She should have run a better campaign so that this house here were not occupied by the most unappealing candidate to ever run as a major on a major party platform. The fact that she lost to Donald Trump, that's the thing that she'll take with her.
Well, okay, here's one of the ones I saw. Is like, well, if you look at the emails that were released by WikiLeaks, so I think the timeline is Russia hacks, Russia has these meetings with Trump Jr., the campaign manager Manafort, and Jared Kushner. Then you get the campaign at the Republican convention. Nobody can say exactly who, but somebody changes the Republican Party's platform about Russian incursion into Ukraine, basically saying that's okay and we won't use military force to prevent them from further incursion. And then you have the next week during the DNC WikiLeaks revelations. So I just want to point out the fact that Don Jr. is saying, I didn't get any information, it was a bust. That's not the point of that meeting. The point of that meeting was to find out if Russia could get something in return for the information. And who knows what was said. There's 3 witnesses, and a couple of them have said they're willing to tell the truth. We'll find out. But what our audience wants to know is that Hillary Clinton had some things that were embarrassing that were revealed in there. They didn't deny them. So ultimately, isn't it still Hillary Clinton's fault?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the world is a complicated place. So saying that, A is 100% the fault of X is always going to be fun, but it's never going to be entirely accurate. And even if it were accurate, it's still good as an intellectual exercise to try to understand a situation as comprehensively as you possibly can. So sure, yeah, absolutely. Like what was revealed in WikiLeaks, as far as we know, was not doctored. There's a talk about whether how level is the playing field if you have one side where all of the stuff is getting dumped in a way that allows like a drip and stories to be taken out of context. I guess one way to think about it is try to think about it if it was a candidate that you're supporting and somebody hacks their email. Let's say it's Bernie. They hack Bernie's email. They take a bunch of stuff kind of out of context. They didn't necessarily have to take it out of context with Clinton, but you certainly can take things out of context. And you start ginning up a bunch of stories day after day after day. I think people would say that was a rigged situation. And in general, we would prefer that these elections be as far on the up and up as is possible.
Yeah, can you step back out of the shadow of this pole a bit? So, I mean, the problem that I see with this is not necessarily about what candidate you supported or that sort of thing, but do we really want our two major political parties jockeying for position with Russia to say, I'll be more pro-Russia, no, I'll be more pro-Russia, in order to get the benefit of this spying? I mean, that essentially is what it's boiling down to at some point, and the Republicans are trying to decide if they want to acknowledge that this has happened or not acknowledge it and try to continue benefiting. I mean, there are reasons why the Constitution tries to prevent conflicts of interest, both financial and basically the Trumps really didn't want to lose. They so didn't want to lose that they were willing to have meetings with representatives of a foreign adversary that said, hey, we can help through spying. So yeah, I mean, I was with Trump for a year. I could tell the guy was really afraid of losing until the last week when the Comey thing kind of turned the tide. He spent the whole speech saying, man, I'm going to lose, but it's not my fault, it's their fault, it's all rigged. He would spend a month crying on stage about how he was going to lose. So he was very focused on not losing, and I think that these guys were willing to entertain any option, but there are supposed to be laws to prevent certain options, and I think this might be one of them.
Yeah, or think about it from the perspective of, let's say it was Monsanto that managed to hack into the DNC and hack into John Podesta's email, and then met with the Trump campaign and said, here's what we've got. All we want is X. That's just everything that Monsanto got by virtue of their hack may well have been true, but that's just not how we want our politics to unfold.
So Bob Maxon is asking, could it be that both parties were complicit in their greed for power? Did they both make a deal with the devil? He says, of course. What do you think?
Well, I mean, they made different deals with different devils, but sure. And other, what would a Democratic operative do in a situation where they were offered, game-changing dirt on their opponent from that clearly was coming from a foreign government's espionage? Who knows? So it's not as if everybody here is clean, but sure, this is.
Let's go back to the financial thing. So there are also rules in place. This is why I interview all the constitutional scholars, so you guys are prepared when headlines like this break, so you understand what this means. But basically, the government was created by the founders to prevent executive officials. In some cases, there are parts of the Constitution written specifically about the president to prevent him from putting any other interest ahead of the country's. That's important. Okay, it's not just in the event that something bad happens in Qatar or something bad happens with, Russia invading NATO allies or that sort of thing. It's just, as Ryan said, it's also the appearance, because it's destabilizing for our country to have us constantly asking ourselves, what are the true motivations of the president? The Office of Ethics,
the Office of Government Ethics.
Yeah, the Office of Government Ethics Schwab, is it his name? Yeah. He just, Peter, what is his, no, not Peter.
I forget his name.
He just resigned because he basically threw up his hands and he said,
Walter,
yeah, that there's no way to hold this group, the Kushner-Trump group, accountable to ethics or to laws because they don't care. If the 35% supports what they're doing, they're just going to keep on doing it. That's the situation we're in.
Right. Democracy is not upheld by a piece of paper, by a constitution. It's an idea more than it is anything else, and it is a collective idea that the entire country or enough of the country has to buy into for it to be self-sustaining, and it requires people to believe that the elections are more or less fair, the legislative process is more or less fair. That's the constitutional principle that grounded campaign finance reform, for instance, 100 years ago, that John Roberts threw out recently. The argument that you can actually, the First Amendment might say you have unlimited free speech, but because the faith in democracy is bedrock, and it is the thing that without which the First Amendment doesn't even exist, then campaign finance laws that regulate political spending around an election are actually constitutional. That's how important it is for people to believe that their system is fair. If you want to see what it looks like when people don't believe that a system is fair, you can go to the Middle East and talk politics with people over there, and you get an unending string of conspiracy theories. Everybody believes that there is some nefarious hand at work in every decision that is made. And take Egypt, for instance. Talk to Egyptian people on the street. Everything that's being done there is either done by the hand of Saudi Arabia or by Israel or by some other outside force that is kind of forcing the hand of
the United States.
Sometimes absolutely the United States, and there's enough truth to it because it happens sometimes that you can believe it every single time, and that's what winds up happening, and that tears at the social fabric because people end up distrusting each other tremendously.
So back to when we were talking about the Monsanto hacks, Barb DiMuzio says a Monsanto hack would be illegal but not treasonous. Treasonous.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I don't even like using throwing the word treason around as much as we're seeing it so much. Would it be? I think it's a completely overused term at this point. You have to go pretty far to get into something that's legitimately treasonous. But okay, let's say it's not treason to work with Monsanto, which might have hacked the DNC in this hypothetical scenario. Does that mean people are cool with that? Is that the kind of politics that we want to run? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think a better analogy might be the Civil War, right? There were countries that were not necessarily cool with the American and the British Empire over the centuries that were thinking about getting involved in the Civil War. And unfortunately, I think there are people in this country who still see ourselves at war. If France had got involved to try to help the South win the Civil War, I think that people would have said, well, that's all fair, we're at war. And I think that there are people on the conservative side of the divide who are basically saying, I mean, the polls show it, that, well, if we needed help from a foreign adversary to win this culture war in America, hey, all is fair in love and war. And that's just a question we need to ask ourselves, because like I said, do we want our major political parties, we want our presidential candidates basically groveling to the oligarchs of all these autocratic nations that have access to the riches of gigantic countries like China and Russia and all of these oil-rich nations? Do we want our politicians groveling to them? We say we don't like it when they're groveling to oil companies that are domestic. Why do we want them groveling to foreign dictators overseas?
And I mean, maybe it's not even worth complaining about. It's been happening for thousands of years. I mean, the Persian Empire, how many thousands of years ago, used to keep the little Greek city-states weak by funding one little city-state to fight against another city-state, and that happened all the way until Alexander kind of invaded them and kind of took them over for a while. But like, and it's been happening ever since then. During World War I, Germany was happy to escort Lenin into what was then Russia, not yet the Soviet Union, hoping that Lenin would help spark a revolution that would lead to the Soviet Union, the coming Soviet Union exiting from World War I. Like, this foreign interference has been happening. It's been a tactic that other governments have used to weaken nations, and there's always a party within that host country that is willing to take the foreign help, because they think the foreign enemy or the foreign country is less dangerous than their domestic enemy, and they figure that they can squash their domestic enemy using this foreign help, and then they can get rid of the foreigner, and it often doesn't work out that way. They both lose.
Thank you for pointing that out. Like, I'm so focused on my frustration with fellow Americans who are saying by any means necessary we must basically prevent the America we are becoming from governing itself, right? The multicultural America that we are becoming. That must be prevented at all costs, whether by gerrymandering, voter suppression, or, I don't want to say it and you don't want to say it, but, cooperation with foreign military intelligence. So that's a problem. But what you're saying is also a huge problem, that you have someone's arriving at the White House, that you have foreign adversaries looking at the way the United States has been divided, really since its inception, or certainly since the Civil War, but especially with all of the the Fox News and the Breitbarts and the Alex Joneses and the Rush Limbaughs out there, especially as the emerging multicultural America has begun to assert itself. This kind of propaganda has gotten more and more extreme, and people from the outside are looking at that and saying this is a great way to weaken the country by dividing it.
Yeah.
She's got one more question.
All right, and last question. We're getting a little too much sun out here.
Okay.
So Melanie Ann is asking, as a veteran, my mind is blown that they all have the highest clearances. Why isn't something being done about that?
We'll see. I mean, it's a question of how much the intelligence agencies are willing to push back. That's a great question on the people who have these clearances. Kushner himself seems to have been struggling with his clearance. He had to amend it because he didn't. He says he forgot to list this meeting with the Russians, and this has happened a bunch of other times. And some of these kind of more peripheral figures have had security clearances rejected. But it's a hard. It's easy for intelligence agents to reject the security clearance of kind of a mid-level, low-level bureaucrat, but to reject a security clearance for the president's son-in-law is putting your career on the line. I'll leave you with one little thought about where this may be heading. I don't remember where I read this. There have been a couple good pieces that have connected these dots. Paul Manafort was at this meeting, and it appears from the public movements that both Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn seem to be cooperating with the FBI, just based on two, maybe three signals. One, both of them used to be pretty mouthy with the press, and both have gone completely silent, which is a thing that prosecutors ask people to do once they've flipped and are cooperating. The second thing they ask people who have flipped to do is to clean up any paperwork problems that they've had in their past. And so what you've seen in recent weeks is Paul Manafort has disclosed tens of millions of dollars that he's gotten from foreign governments to do lobbying. He's amended a bunch of his foreign agent registration forms, and Mike Flynn did the same thing. And in the process, it appears that Manafort listed this meeting with the Russians as a contact that he had with somebody in a foreign government. So you're seeing all of this paperwork being filed, which is the type of thing that would be consistent with two people flipping and now working with the feds against the administration. The fact that Manafort was in on that meeting with Kushner, with the Russian agent, and with Donald Trump Jr. Certainly does not bode well for the Trump administration. Thanks so much for everything. I look forward to reading these comments, seeing what you guys had to say, and I'll talk to you very soon.